So hello everyone, thanks for coming out on Thursday evening. And I think there are still some people who are going to be joining us a bit later. We'll see how it goes. This series is called Machine Visions. It's a lecture series organized as part of a class called Artificial Intelligence and Photography. It's supported by a grant from Google, Artist plus Machine Intelligence Research, and the Office of the Promotion at Columbia University. Last semester, we had 5 guests. We started with another artist who works with artificial intelligence, Trevor Paglan. Then we went a little bit into industry. We had Ben Cheetham from Microsoft, and then Santiago Leon from Adobe. Harshan Kapoor, one of them is a Columbia graduate, and they run a startup called Soot. And then we have Rashid Haq at Cruise, driverless cars. This semester, we want to lean more towards artists who work in AI, and Alexey is our first guest. And I especially want to thank Ridwan Rahman, who is second year AF in the photo concentration, who really told me about Alexey's work. And then I discovered, of course, that you had been doing guest scripts for 3 years here. Actually, this is the 3rd year, right?
Third semester.
Third semester. And many people here, some of the people here already know your work. I'm just going to briefly read the bio. You told me not to read it in too much details. So Alexey Yurenev is a photographer and visual researcher interested in how technology shapes the production of collective memory. He co-founded a platform dedicated to innovative visual strategies called photodemic.org and is faculty at the International Center of Photography in New York. I believe some of your former students might also be here today. And since 2019, Alexey has been working on a visual research project called Silent Hero, which he will talk about today. Alexey will talk for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have questions. And the event is being recorded. For those who could not attend, we're going to put the event up on the website. So your presence here, hopefully you're consenting to your question being recorded. If for any reason you really want to ask a question but do not want to be in the video, just let me know and we'll take that portion on. Okay, Alexey, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
So I'm going to start out with a sound check and unmute myself. Can everyone hear me if I speak this loud? Yeah, okay, good. So 2 disclaimers to start off. This project contains, and this presentation contains content of war and violence, and if you're uncomfortable and sensitive about that, please, you're welcome to leave at any time. And the second disclaimer, I have a tendency of speaking too fast, so forgive me in advance. But let's just get straight into it. So,
also, please speak louder.
Louder, okay. So the project I'm going to talk about today is called Silent Hero. And it started out in 2019 when I was working as a photojournalist and documentary photographer. And at that time, I was in Moscow, Russia, working on projects. And I attended a lecture by American theoretician and author Fred Richin, who's also Dean Emeritus at ICP. And he gave this presentation on future of visual storytelling and journalism. And in that presentation, he showed a project that was developed by an Uber engineer, Philip Wang, called This Person Does Not Exist. What This Person Doesn't Exist is a website where one can enter, and with every refresh of a browser, you're confronted with an image of a person the picture of a person that is indecipherable from photography, but in fact it's a synthetic image made by a generative adversarial neural network. So for me, that encounter with a synthetic image was a clear demarcation in my career and my practice as, asking 2 questions. The first one, what does it mean for me as a photographer to continue my practice in the world where we have images that look like photographs, but they're not? And the second question, how can I use this technology that's commonly used in nefarious ways, such as deep fakes, for something more meaningful? So I started thinking about how can I implement this tech, and just as the title of that project, This Person Doesn't Exist, suggests that unlike photojournalism, this technology has a promise of speculation, of instead of bringing us to places and events that exist but we can't go to, like what photojournalism is, it can bring us to places and events that never existed but could have. So I grew up in Russia. I was born in Moscow in 1986. That's 41 years after World War II has ended. But the narrative of the proliferated narrative of World War II was so omnipresent that it made me feel like it just only ended like 2 weeks before I was born. My grandfather fought in the war. That's a picture of him and his brother. What, louder?
Is it possible to kill these lights?
We have to keep them on for the recording, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so my grandfather fought in the war. He lost his brother in the fighting. He fought the war until Berlin, was part of Auschwitz liberation, was decorated with medals. But he never talked about his stories. And every time he would be asked, he would either cry or make jokes. And before his death in 2009, he used to tell me, as his only grandson, I'm responsible of carrying his medals and his memories. And when he died, I got the medals, but not the memories. So I started my search about the story that I don't know anything about in my personal archives, looking at the drawings I was making for him when I was 6 years old, and thinking about all the archives I was surrounded by that proliferated that narrative of the war, which was at the same time, there was a saying in Russia that true heroes are silent, and the ones that talk are embellishers and confabulators. And this silence, in a way, in this culture of silence, it propagated this singular narrative coming from archives and museums and institutions and government as well. And I'm looking at family history archives, like family archives, like these images that you see on the screen. If I look at them and think about that they are representative of my grandfather's experience in the war, then his war has happened in a photography studio. And the unimaginable that I was trying to think of, like what does the war remember? What is the real memory of war that's personal to my grandfather, not found in archives? It's obscured. So, and looking at state archives and looking at iconic photographs of World War II, such as this image by Yevgeny Khaldei, which was taken during commemorating the raising of flag on Reichstag. In fact, it was staged and retouched. It was taken a week late after the Reichstag already has fallen, and the flag in this image was actually a tablecloth that was sourced from the TASS agency that was used for the banner. The watch in the man's arm on the bottom right was retouched because it was worn on the right hand and assumed to be looted. The sky was darkened for dramatization. So again, if you're thinking about the authenticity and credibility of these images, these still did not make it for me to illustrate what I was trying to find out, what my grandfather never talked about. So it was 2019. So back then, we did not have a technology of generative AI as we do today. There were nothing that you could prompt with, nothing that you can easily just generate. So I looked into the same tech that was used by Philip Wang, which is generative adversarial neural network, and it was COVID. So I had a lot of free time when many of us were learning how to make sourdough bread. I was looking into coding with Python. So the way that GAN works, it's two neural networks. You have a forger and a critic. It's a really data-hungry system. It needs thousands and millions of images to produce something that we call photographs, that looks like photographs. So I collected 35,000 images of World War II and started training these networks. The origin of this technology actually comes from World War II, from Norbert Wiener's feedback system research. So that was used to develop early radar systems for V-2 rocket and enemy aircraft detection. And so the way it works, so you train these two networks, the forger and the critic. The forger creates an image, and the critic verifies it with the originals. And once the critic is satisfied, the image gets produced. And the more of these cycles and epochs happen, the more realistic or closer to the original the images are produced. So after months and months of failures, I received this result. For me, it's not eventful, but yet symbolic for how much I knew about my grandfather's time in the war. As my machine grew smarter and smarter, I started getting images like this. They're just a collection of pixels, but for me, they already start resembling images that I digested along with the algorithm. This collaboration with AI was kind of forced me to study the images, because every image had to be optimized, cropped, and classified, and put into different classification systems for the machine to be able to learn it. So I made three data sets, which was battlefields, aftermath, and war actors. And something to note about my training parameters for the machine. What you're supposed to do if you go by the manual of training GAN, when you're getting results and you're getting images that deviate from the original data set in a distant way, you're supposed to correct the vector of learning. I did not want to arrive at something that looks like a photograph. For me, it was important to really have enough photographs of World War II, and that's not something that illustrates the memory of my grandfather. I wanted to get something deeper. I wanted to go underneath the medial layer of an image and find some kind of a tacit knowledge that photography often conceals. And when I look at them, I still see war. I see battles, I see explosions, I see soldiers. And to verify my own subjectivity, I decided to create another feedback system with me as a human in the loop to put these images into into Google Cloud Vision API. What Google Cloud Vision API is an image recognition system that is responsible for image classification in what we call Google Image Search. So when I upload these images into the API, as you see, it recognizes military content, history, and photography. And there's no note of synthetic imagery or anything in that regard. And for me, it reassures that the results I'm getting are actually accurate to the time and memory and the subject that I'm trying to delineate. As I said, I had another data set that I used to to train the AI was called War Actors, which consisted of pictures of soldiers similar to the ones that I found in my family archive. They were soldiers looking healthy, posing full of honor and glory in the field or in a photography studio. And here, what my machine has done, it ingested these historical photographs and spewed out post-historical photographs, looking into something more than statistical intelligence that AI is often being called. But for me, it's like lifts up that medial layer and looks beyond iconicity and glory and shows the true face of war, which is grotesque. Further down the road, I was showing these images to a Dutch book designer, Toon van der Heijden, who, looking at the image on the right of the synthetic soldier I've created, he's found striking resemblance of that image to the image found inside a book, War Against War. War Against War was a book published by was published by Ernst Friedrich, a German anarcho-pacifist who, after World War I, not World War II, collected war evidence of atrocities, wounded soldiers, killings, and destruction, and wrote the book in 4 languages, in English, Dutch, German, and French, calling to all lands and all mankind to stop future wars by displaying the horrors of war and the photographic evidence that, as he calls, the only form of evidence that results from credible witnessing. So this finding resulted in a compilation that I've created called Seeing Against Seeing, where I'm for someone that works with AI, I only generated about 150 images with my machine. It was important for me to kind of work with a smaller results, smaller set of images. I don't want to over-proliferate these images and set them out in the world. So out of those 150, 50 had a doppelganger inside this book. So what I did is I took the original publication and inserted my images into the book. And together, now this book is called Seeing Against Seeing, which is not trying to diminish Friedrich's statement about the impact of imagery onto future conflicts, but more about creating a dialectic of visualizing conflict with technologies separated by a century. And the shape of the book forms a circle to hint on the cyclical cadence of histories. And speaking of Seeing Against Seeing and these striking resemblances, this is an image from Encyclical Cadence of Histories. This is an image from Gaza, taken this April, and this is an image found inside, made by my GAN trained on World War II. So again, these are the images in this book is composed of images of World War I that have nothing to do with the data that my AI was trained on. I mean, all AI is really data hungry. You need a lot of data to kind of feed it so it can perform better. So I was, in a way, at this stage in the project, my rig was kind of dictating my following steps. So I was like looking for more data to train the machines. So I came across an archive of Russian Ministry of Defense where I was able to put in my grandfather's name, and from knowing nothing about him, I was able to find out all of his movements during the war. I found the battle routes, maps, scans of war logs, talking about every day in the war with like how much ammo was used, how much land was captured and lost. And in a way, from knowing nothing to being covered with this deluge of data where it just becomes indecipherable and actually did not even carry that much meaning. But in the same data set, I was thinking about his brother that was lost, that was missing for 79 years at that point. I typed up his name, and his a file came up right away with a spot on the map where he was killed, and a document describing that day. So he was a part of the division that was protecting, fighting for a strategic section of a railroad, which was a logistical route to supply troops in Stalingrad, currently called as Volgograd. And the spot on the map was, there was a GPS coordinate with an accuracy of about 3 square kilometers. So I said to go there, and here, after all my experience with AI, I started looking at photography and its own capacity of other tacit knowledge it can produce. Like, how is what kind of technological fiction it can provide? What can we use in the function of the camera to get closer to history? Like, how do we generate this proximity? So I used an 8x10 apparatus, which was loaded with orthographic film. This film in particular is was used for masking in the darkroom and copies of negatives as well as documents. So for me, and it's also, this film is not sensitive to what human eye sees as color red. So for me, it was a gesture to peel away layers of visible reality to get to the history I'm trying to reach, to the day where my grand uncle was killed in this field. And in a way, his presence in my life was justified by his absence. I know nothing about Naum except for the fact that he was missing. So finding myself in the middle of a snowy field where I was basically photographing a horizon line, and that would represent his absence. And back to AI. This is a generated image from my data from my GAN, which resulted from accumulation and synthesis of 35,000 images. And if each image containing several perspectives of a photographer, a camera, subject, and audience, and then put all together to spit out what you see on the screen, then looking at it in this way and going back to the landscape, then this image is also a collection of perspectives of 2 million people that died in the battle and buried under the snow. And the place where I'm standing was spatially accurate, but temporally dislocated by 8 decades. And on the left is my collaboration with the Russian snow that got inside my dark slide of an 8x10. And for me, these images also, I'm looking at the space, and what I'm looking at are scars. They're scars of war. And something that is just left out, that I'm standing there too late. But then they're open again, because this was January 31st, 2022. Before leaving, I went to the Motherland Call Monument to witness the scene of a regiment of soldiers going on their way to take an oath to the Russian army. And 3 weeks later, Russia unfolded its full-scale invasion on Ukraine. And here I thought that my machine that I've created started to dream of itself. Still many questions about the medals that my grandfather left me after his death. This medal in particular is a Medal of Glory in 3rd class, which is given out for an act of valor or act of heroism. You really had to do something important to get this medal. So I found in the same archive, I found this document which described the act of valor. When my grandfather was 20 years old, it was 1944. During the counteroffensive in western Ukraine, he forded a river, killed a sniper, took 4 people hostage, killed 2 more that resisted, and that let the army advance. On the same exact day, my grandmother was in evacuation, was being photographed with her girlfriends in a photography studio. And then on the back of this photograph, she wrote a poem to my grandfather how their youth is gone forever because of the war. So I followed a similar strategy by traveling to this field and collecting data, looking at the field work as a form of data collection for the future training of the AI models. Again, standing in the places where the event has happened, but I'm standing there too late. And looking at resemblances both in the geological terms of the soil that remembers everything, and also how memory, what happens to memory, to the memorization of this event, such as image on the left, that is a defaced monument of World War II because now it represents the oppressor. And together, so all the data that I've collected between the field work in Ukraine, images of my grandfather, images from my war machine that was made by a GAN, and I was using the description of the event in the document as prompts in a fine-tuned model of stable diffusion to create scenography for a graphic novel that I call 170844, connecting two histories of my grandfather and my grandmother to reimagine and renegotiate the events of that day. To try different ways of getting closer to that history and the experience of my grandfather, I was in Ukraine last November, where I was photographing a surgery of a Ukrainian soldier that had his jaw blown off by a mine, and his jaw was being reconstructed from a bone extracted from his leg. And again, thinking about technological capacity of fiction and what is in other forms of artificial intelligence that are tools such as cameras can produce, I was using a digital camera, and the function of time. As you know, a bulb shutter speed on your camera, how it works when you press a button, the shutter is open, when you let it go, it closes. So I was measuring how much I can look at violence without looking away. So the images that you see on the screen, so the longer I could look, the more abstract the image becomes, and the less I could look, the sharper the image is. I realized there is one more thing I could do to get closer to my grandfather's history is by meeting World War II veterans, and that I found a community of World War II veterans and survivors that live in New York, in Brighton Beach. It's a Russian-speaking neighborhood where I was able to connect with 19 veterans who are around 100 years old, who are the same age as my grandfather during the war. And first, I embarked on collecting all their oral histories, just to kind of take the history back into their hands and not in the hands of an institution, because when communicative memory dies, it gets handed off to a cultural memory, and then the provenance changes and becomes politicized. The memory of these men and women is now being used to justify the invasion. So it was an important gesture for me to take it in the hands and transfer it to their family members. And then I realized that there was one more thing to do, because again, back to that question of what these images are and how do they represent this memory, I found a chance to, thinking about Yuku's Yuku's definition of remembering, which is a reconstruction of a fragmented past that's projected into the future, but it happens in the present. I decided to use these images as prompts to recall and renegotiate history. So I showed these AI imagery, explaining how AI works to these centennial veterans, and that resulted in a film, No One Is Forgotten, that I'm going to screen right now. Maybe we should turn the lights off for that.
Нет, немножко, да? Что-то ярче нужно.
Да, мне кажется, что ярче лучше.
Ярче, ну.
Красный.
Вот, может быть. Красно-синий. Такой красивый галстук. Папки, хорошо, найдем. Ну, дело не то, что красивый, дело в том, чтобы он подходил, понимаешь? Я понимаю, так для камеры. По-моему, сюда и подходит. Ну, это... Какого цвета ты имеешь в виду?
Вот это хорошо.
Тебя должна Европа смотреть. А в Европе свои вкусы. Этот будет хорошо, Алексей сказал. Хорошо. Не жмет, не давит. Не давит тебе здесь?
А?
Не давит? Вот это самое. Пуговица не давит?
Надо ровненько, чтобы было.
Ты меня сейчас слышишь?
Педали?
Не давит пуговица?
Нет, не дали.
Так, сейчас слышишь?
Лучше.
Лучше, уже хорошо.
Я работаю над проектом, где я пытаюсь приблизиться к истории памяти моего дедушки, кто воевал во Второй мировой войне, как и вы. Он тоже был на Курской дуге и был в Первом Белорусском фронте и так далее. Но я ничего не знаю про его историю, он никогда не рассказывал. И мне было очень интересно услышать ваши истории, других ветеранов. И сейчас я, так как я фотограф, я в основном изучаю изображения, архивные изображения, разные методы фотографических исследований истории. И сейчас, в 2024 году, существует такая технология под названием искусственный интеллект.
Где?
Искусственный интеллект.
Искусственный интеллект.
Интеллект, да.
Бои, которые тут изображены, это бои танкистов. Бои, которые решали жизни людей. И, конечно, очень больно смотреть на обгорелые тела тех людей, которые погибли в бою. Вот. Бегут куда-то или к танку, или от танка. Это волна черного дыма, горящего. Это страшно. Это вообще изуродованное лицо. Видишь, и уши оттопыренные. И солдатская шапка на нем. Это ведь красивое, интеллигентное лицо человека в берете. А может, это головной убор просто такой? Или без головного убора? Обгоревшая прическа. Это группа людей, которые в колонне шла, тоже попала под огонь. Ну, движется медленно. Это тоже под огонь попало. Крики, боли, крики огня. Вот это более знакомое. На лошадях. Первое время ж были почти все на лошадях. Расчеты. Два уноса, 3 уноса. Не было машин. Это в 43-м году уже, когда нам подбросили тягу, откровенно говоря, американцы. И Виллисы, и Студебекеры, и Додж 3/4, который очень выручал нас, как тягловая сила. Очень выручал. Вот я уже говорил, интеллигентное лицо такое приятное было. Ушли люди в вечность, так говорят. Гвоздички одни остались в память о тех людях, которые погибли.
Well, in this journey, I traveled through histories, spaces, and time to try to find this solid floor in this memory, in the absence of this memory, to kind of come to one realization that there is no such thing as a solid floor. The floor, in fact, is liquid, and we just need to learn how to swim as if not to drown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexey. That was great and very moving film to end with. We now have the floor open for questions for Alexey, and I have one request, which is the session is being recorded for those who could not make it. So just if you could speak a little loudly and introduce yourself as well. So whoever has the first question, please raise your hand and go ahead. Gilda.
Hi. Did you have any prior experience with AI before you decided to sort of use it for this project, or was this entirely new?
No. So my background, I was in documentaries, just in photography. So I was, as in working for an assignment for publications like New York Times and National Geographic. I had no experience whatsoever in AI. And yeah, it was a gift of COVID because I had time to really learn, and it was basically a school of YouTube and some machine learning collaborators on the way that suggested some things to me and showed me some tools, but I've had to learn for everything from scratch. And again, it's like the GANs are at this point, it's a Paleolithic technology. It's kind of amazing in a way because you can go inside the black box. I mean, that's also important for me to use because I just wanted to make sure that my AI that is so sensitive, trying to delineate my grandfather's memory, is not pre-trained on some obscure images that I don't know about. You can get full access to the black box because, even the computer scientists that deploy these models can't possibly calculate all the neural parameters. It's just that they're incalculable, so we don't really have a full idea of how this works. But in terms of data, I had control.
Alexey, could you explain also for the audience why GANs are now Paleolithic technology?
Sorry?
What's the reason for GANs now being put aside? It isn't just about it being outdated in 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because I mean, even like on the platforms, like there's many platforms where you can train them. Like there's Runway, for example. It's these environments where you can train the models. They've discontinued GANs. Everyone wants to push you towards stable diffusion and other types of AI. I mean, I think, in my opinion, it's because of that control, because you can go under the hood and tweak things, and I mean, in a way, like control what the output is and the input. And I think that's my opinion of why, but it's not really sure.
Do you normally train your models? So you get the, let's say like Llama 3.2 that came out, and you get just a raw model and train it from the ground up on your own images, or you get a pre-trained model and then sort of use your images as prompts?
So in this project, I mean, the beginning, as I said, it's all trained from scratch. It's a GAN that's started from scratch. And then for the graphic novel, I used Stable Diffusion, which was fine-tuned, and there was some hybridized models that I've crossed over to get to the results I wanted to. But it is in fact a fine-tuned Stable Diffusion.
You had a question. My name is Samuel. How do you feel, great work on the documentary, by the way. How do you feel we can protect privacy and data, when it comes to utilizing AI?
Sorry, can you just be a little louder? I cannot hear it. Privacy and data?
Yeah, how do you feel we can protect ourselves?
Of your data?
Yeah.
Just throw your phone out and don't put anything online.
That's impossible.
Yeah.
What's the next suggestion?
Go in a cave. I mean, even if you walk out of the house, you're being on camera. I mean, I don't think there is everything is being scraped. I don't think there is a way to protect yourself. I know there are tools and companies where they can track your intellectual property, but I don't know, I don't really have interest in my research in that. And somebody once told me that they tried to copyright their McDonald's receipt once, I don't know, there are ways to protect, but I mean, in these kind of cases, it's much harder to play the defense game than the offense game, for sure. Just like as you saw, like if same thing with like detection, it's the same conversation. It's the systems of generation are much more advanced than systems of detection.
Just introduce you.
Yes, I'm MFA, Columbia MFA student. My major is producing art and film. And my question is, in exploring this project, what kind of possibilities or limitations do you feel about AI, using AI in a kind of art activities?
Well, for me, it's just a tool. It's not. It has its own. I like to interrogate the image. That's what my practice is kind of about. I look at how technology shapes things in general, whether it's memory or knowledge, and how it gets me closer or further away for certain events I'm trying to delineate, and kind of really unpack the tool in this way. So for me, it's. Sorry, can you go back to the questions? I just don't want to go too far out.
It's in exploring this project, what kind of limitations?
Limitations, yeah. I mean, honestly, right now the limitations have grown because you can't go inside the tool. Like, I mean, I don't like anything that's ready-made. It's just the results they're just not interesting to me. And I think that now, I mean, in my practice, what I like to do with those tools is kind of, again, to create these feedback loops of like have the generative AI produce an image and put it back into it and see what it recognizes and what it doesn't, and where does things start falling apart. I think that synthetic data and training on synthetic data is interesting too. I mean, in a way, I think there's more. I see it more as advantages in what I do, and like when it makes sense conceptually to what I do, in a form of fiction, because it's in this case it produces a disruptive fiction, but the one that can disrupt a stable historical narrative. So it is a destructive but disruptive. So and for me it's important. It's just kind of to go away from the standard knowledge and to collaborate with something non-human, to look under the layers of image, of iconicity and lexicality, and I think that allows it to do.
There was just one person behind you.
Yeah.
Let me come back to you. Yeah.
Brett?
No, you're good.
I have two questions.
You say who you are if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Britt. I used to be Alexey's student at the International Center for Photography. I wonder what you consider and how you refer to the work that the machine creates. Is it a photograph? Is it a painting? Is it a work? Like, I wonder how you define it in your mind, and if it,
I don't
especially with your practice. And then my second question is just what's next? Because I feel like
I think wonder is the best word in that question, because I don't define I wonder, and I want everyone else to wonder, because I don't know what they are. I think there are propositions like Ali Shaberi proposes to look at these as virtual photographs, because and the logic he uses, the theory that he proposes is that if we're not writing, we're typing. So if this is based on photography, this is a virtual photograph. For me, it's kind of sensitive. I mean, I come from more traditional practice. I don't call them synthetic images. For me, it's a more comfortable way of referring to them. But I think that it's kind of, I think what they do to me is not, it's like the question is not what they are, but what did they do to photography? I think they expand the notion of photography and help us to understand photography better. In a way of, we should treat it as if we are like in 19th century in painting, just this is what photography did to painting. What Benjamin said, it liberated art from its aura. And then in the same way, we can look at this logic as, use this logic to propose that AI is here to liberate photography from its authority over truth and have other ways photography can expand. Nina?
Hi, I'm Nina Berman. I teach photography and journalism school. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering if you could expand a bit on the very end of the film.
Okay, sorry.
If you could expand a bit on the very end of the film, where the character speaks about our sort of propensity through technology for self-destruction. And it felt a little surprising to hear that at the end, after watching how the images or whatever you want to call them, the prints certainly, were prompting some things. So could you talk more about that and why you wanted to include that at the end?
I mean, for me, it was an interesting comment that, what he says that all technology originates from the military environment. Because as I said, the GANs originated in World War II. Photography is also history. I mean, radio, internet, before becoming a consumer technology, was a military technology. I mean, it was just his honest take on things. That it's. I mean, I have another bit of the interview I actually was considering to use, because he starts out. He's asking. I tell him what my practice is about and what my objective is for these interviews, and to which he started out saying by saying, what is the history of the world? It's history of wars. And he's also a mathematician. He's really knowledgeable of Norbert Wiener, and I mean, that's just his character. And for me, I mean, this is actually the video that you saw is it's a loop that is a part of this foam installation that I did. And because then it just goes back to this original memory. I think that's.
So it wasn't supposed to be like a lasting thought?
I mean it.
I'm just, because of course there's like all this conversation and public sphere that AI is going to destroy the world and it's out of control. And so I was just trying to understand where do you sit in this thinking on that?
Well, I personally sit outside of optimism or pessimism. It's just a point of view. It's a point of view of a man that was interacting with these images. That I felt that it's kind of. I think that also the purpose of the loop too, because I think we are all in that loop at the end. That we're so easily be afraid of something and go into the self-destruction narrative, right? But that is even someone who has lived through these horrific events at the end takes it. I don't know. That's their point of view. So I just keep it in. Yep.
I'd like to ask about your comments about AI works seems not to be interesting for you because, not because, and for example, some philosophers mentioned about aura of artwork, like including artistic intelligence or value experiencing like that, which will make something artistic. And for me, it's extremely interesting for me because what is the difference between interesting artwork, one not interesting kind of something? So for you, what elements makes you feel, oh, this work is interesting or this work is valuable?
In general?
In general.
It's interesting to say that. I think it's more about this associations, that is like, what does it evoke something in me? Like for me, I mean, I'm right now, like I'm just ending this presentation, so I'm thinking about the content, the images that I've showed you, but immediately after seeing these images, they were more expressive than the ones I saw in the archive, that I think that's what, I think it's just so case specific, right? It's like, it's something internally that triggers you, that you maybe connect to your memory or personal experience. Some things move you, some things don't. I don't think I think it's on a neurological level rather than kind of this educated, learned level,
Do you think there's a different relationship from memory to virtual pictures and memory and normal documentary? What's the relationship? Did you go through a change in thinking about memory?
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, the whole reason to start this project is to kind of explore other types of imagery. And the images that like, let's say photographs, documentary photographs, I had a problem with them here because, they're trying, through their relationship to the real and the realistic and lexical qualities, they persuade or convince you of some kind of a singular event. I mean, we often look at the photograph and, let's say a photograph of my grandfather and they say, this is my grandfather. But we forget that this is, it's a photograph of my grandfather. And it's like, what happens outside of the image where there's not enough, the other things are ripped out of context. Again, as the current, like if you look at the same archive I was looking at in the Ministry of Defense, has been curated to show Ukrainian Nazi collaborations, to justify the invasion that's happening now. So it's like, how do these things get manipulated? So for me, these latent images that never really fully developed, in a way have a different type of mediation that maybe is more, it's unfixed, it's not trying to hard mediate some kind of a singular truth. Although, that we can all argue that does it exist or not.
I have a question. I'm sure there might be others, but just, the film was beautiful, and it was the end of your presentation. And it's the time when you also were sitting with us. We're all in the same direction. And I was struck by, there's part of me which was trying to figure out how old they were from World War II. Then I was thinking, okay, they're 80s or 90s.
100.
100, okay.
Yeah.
So they're really older than I actually even thought. I was in my head thinking early 90s, comparing, for example, with my mother's memory. And then they're in Brighton Beach, so they're not in Russia anymore either. They're dislocated. They might feel safer talking about certain things because they're not in Russia, but they're also far away from the original site. And you have these different reactions they have, and sometimes I would look at their looks of confusion and think, are they confused because they've forgotten already? Because they could be being of a certain age that you had told them they're artificial intelligence, or are they looking confused because they're trying to process why does this look so similar to, and sometimes you give a prompt, you say what does it remind you of, and sometimes you say what do you see? What do you see is something you might say with them. And then I kept thinking that these people must be, and I didn't even know there were 100, must have their struggles with their memory anyway. You're asking them to recall back to 1944, 45, and then I'm wondering what artificial intelligence does in this space, or even forget about the way I put in the platform, just what this work does in terms of people whose memory is already so fluid and changing from day to day, then being asked to look at images and recall something else, while these are also not images of that. You know, the images aren't, they're not a reminder, they're a recreation.
Yeah.
Just if you could reflect on that.
Of course. I mean, yeah, so it's a group of veterans between 99 and 105. I've not intentionally pre-screened them, but I have interviewed 19 of them to collect their oral storytelling. And out of that group, it was partially because who was easily to reach, because they're not often feeling well to give interviews or how are available. So, and I wanted to kind of create a range of different cognitive states, you know, that I knew that some were sharper than others and more acute. And, but for me, it was, still was, it was an experiment in a way to see what happens, but it was also, you know, to describe the futility of memory. You know, every time you remember something, you can never put the book on the same shelf. You know, it's just, a memory gets dislocated just like these guys got dislocated from Soviet Union to, we're all transplants, and the memory is always transplanted. And what happens in this synthesis of, you know, your personal experiences, lived life, and then a story that's been, yes, it's true, they were, you know, this culture of silence was propagated until about, let's say, like early 2000s, and these folks moved to New York between 1980 and 2000. So, and from then on, their point of, like, their most important part of life is May 9th, the Victory Day, and to retell their story over and over and over and over again. So what happens with these narratives? How accurate are they? Are there embellishers or confabulators because they speak? You know, it's uncertain. And it's almost, in the reach, I'm pretty well aware I can't get my grandfather's experience back into life, but how close can I get it through these mediation technologies, and where else does it bring me, is the question. It's kind of, it doesn't bring to this definitive, preconceived and certain goal, you know, it's this, but can they be used? Like, what happens if you just join, just like that, the book where the technology is separated by a century, and also thinking about them, it happened in their lifetime, you know, they grew up, you know, barely with cars around, just being kind of around, you know, and then they have AI, and I think it's important for them to know. Yeah.
Harikya from ICT. He also mentioned about your grandma's letters too.
Yeah.
So did you share anything with her?
Oh yeah. That's actually an interesting question. So there's another part that I excluded from the presentation, but looking for the truth of his experience and trying to delineate where he was during the war. So most of the correspondence is just love letters to my grandmother. But in the middle of these love letters, he writes about the joy he gets from walking around the ruined German cities, which is like mixed notes. It's like it's consistently in every letter. It's like, oh, I love you very much. Oh, I love watching ruins. You know, so it kind of like was not making sense. And I asked my parents about this. I'm like, what is going on? It just like it's really looks like copy pasted in the middle. And they're like, well, you know, he was a Jew. He was a German interpreter, and and all the letters have a stamp of military censorship. So arguably he was writing these passages to reassure his patriotism to the third party reading the letters. So that was a really kind of uncertain but interesting finding in that. And also he writes to my grandmother, my little kitten, to which she responds, don't call me your little kitten, I have a name. While he's in the trenches being shot at.
Love letters seem like the perfect place to end this debate. Everyone, there's a table with Alexey's books. Please take a look at it and talk to Alexey afterwards.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.